Hello and welcome to this video on social anxiety, brought to you by the Miniatures Apothecary. So during this video we're going to cover the basics of social anxiety, its causes and how we can potentially treat it as to not hinder us in the long run. While at the Horus Heresy Open event, I unfortunately experienced the effects of social anxiety quite severely, for the first time in a long time. I had to take multiple trips outside simply to take a breather and regulate myself. And since then, I've spoken to a number of other people who had similar experiences. I've also seen various social media posts from other attendees who shared similar experiences. Social anxiety as a whole appears to have been made worse for many people by the lockdowns we've had on and off for the last couple of years. This has affected some people more than others. For some, who have never experienced social anxiety before, to then have this experience is scary to say the least. And for those already suffering from social anxiety, having been through that social exclusion of lockdown, followed by a sudden increase of social events, could increase the likelihood of triggering an episode. Social anxiety or social anxiety disorder is an overwhelming fear of social situations such as meeting or speaking to people. Typically, physical reactions to social anxiety include an increased heart rate, perspiration, selective mutism, hyperventilation, and an overwhelming feeling of wanting to run away. People can also experience feelings of being watched and or judged by those around them. Anticipatory anxiety, so that anxiety you feel building up to an event, can lead those who suffer from social anxiety to avoid opportunities for conversation or public speaking. Now, lesser known symptoms can include extreme feelings of anxiety during unwanted or stressful social interactions, so those moments where you're there but you don't really want to be there. Poor verbal communication skills, which can be complicated by a person's inability to think clearly while experiencing anxiety. Overly critical self-evaluation of performance after conversations or spoken presentations are finished. This obviously can then trigger things like imposter syndrome. It also can then lead on to low self-esteem and a lack of self-confidence, which are then reinforced by the constant self-criticism which you have. All of which can then lead to further long-term social anxiety and hinder our ability to enjoy ourselves while at events and gatherings. So it's just one big vicious circle. There are a number of recognised causes for social anxiety. Now, bear with me because these do seem a little bit extreme. However, there's been a lot of research gone into this. Top of the list is physical, sexual or emotional abuse. Bullying and teasing, family conflict, domestic violence and divorce, death or the desertion of a parent, maternal stress during pregnancy or infancy. Like I said, most of these causes may feel fairly extreme. They are, in fact, the major contributors for the development of social anxiety. Like with most mental health conditions, there is no way of measuring how much each experience contributes to the development of social anxiety. This will be different for each person. I've personally known two separate people, one of whom spent the better part of his school, college and university life being bullied and teased by peers, who has grown up without suffering from social anxiety. And at the same time, the other person who has gone through a fairly amicable divorce with no signs or form of domestic abuse, who struggles daily with social anxiety. So it's hard to gauge exactly how our experiences cause us to develop social anxiety or how to stop this from happening. That being said, social anxiety is treatable. There are a lot of medical and social studies looking into this, its causes and its possible treatments. and many people have used their own experiences to discuss the topics. There are a huge amount of resources out there for anyone wishing to know more. I will try and put a couple of links in the description below. However, there is one example that I'd like to share, and that is from the book Social Anxiety by Mark R. Leary and Robin M. Kowalski, published in 1995, which cites Shakespeare's As You Like It. They discuss the attitude of people framing life as a theatre production, where humans are but actors on a stage. Now, we all know the saying, surely. Shakespeare wrote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts." Leary and Kowalski frame this in the book by comparing Shakespeare's quote to other philosophers who have framed life through the lens of acting. Although his analogy of the world as a stage is among his most well-known lines, Shakespeare was neither the first nor the last writer to draw a parallel between the theatre and everyday life. 100 years earlier, Erasmus asked, "What after all is human life if not a continuous performance in which all go about wearing different masks, in which everyone acts a part assigned to him until the stage director removes him from the boards?" Now, they go on to further quote Goldberg, who talked about the smaller world, which is the stage, and the larger stage, which is the world. Further to Erasmus's question and Goldberg's statement, they also looked at sociologist Irving Goffman, who analysed daily life using theatrical metaphors, complete with performers, audiences, sets, roles, props, and even a backstage area. Now, to me, this is incredibly interesting, and I would suggest giving the entire book a read if you can get your hands on a copy. I will try and stick a link in the description below as to where I found it online. Now, I know things have changed somewhat since 1995, but the fundamentals of social anxiety haven't. Yes, okay, so things may have been made worse due to the amount of time we spend online, as it's easy to mask our true selves as opposed to in person. This can lull us into a false sense of security and then hit us harder during a personal event or gathering. But there are ways around some of the more modern catalysts. Remind yourself that the people you engage with online aren't always going to be what you expect in person. Obviously, this is very similar to Never Meet Your Heroes, for example. Generally speaking, people mask on social media in one way or another, sometimes without even thinking, in order to prevent a perfect picture of themselves. The internet has given those normally fairly shy or quiet a voice to be as loud as they want to be. This has given rise to people being more outspoken about controversial topics online that would normally not be raised during face-to-face engagements, regardless of whether it's something we should be talking about or not. The same can be said the other way around. A work colleague who appears quiet and closed off in the working environment could be rather loud and wild, feeling more comfortable in a casual setting as opposed to the workspace. Maybe you know someone who in large groups is rather loud, always the centre of attention, maybe? This could also be a case of someone dealing with social anxiety in their own way, keeping the unwelcome negative thoughts at bay by being loud, but in private they're a lot quieter and chilled out because they're more comfortable in smaller groups. There are a number of recognised ways of treating social anxiety, but remember, everyone is different and deals with their own mental health in different ways. So one way of dealing with it that I didn't realise until recently was in fact cosplaying. Yes, you heard that correctly. I had a lovely discussion with Rachel Huntington. Link to her Instagram will be in the description. I met her at the Horus Heresy Open Day, and she asked whether I had considered the concept of cosplay as a way of dealing with social anxiety. Literally putting on a physical mask to deal with the likes of social anxiety. Personally, and from a hobbying perspective, this is genius. I was completely oblivious to this as a way of dealing with it. But thinking about that conversation on the way home from the event, it makes perfect sense. And when I spoke to Mrs. Apothecary, she backed this concept up, as she has previously cosplayed and stated that she feels confident in character than when she was just being herself. Cosplaying allows people to physically hide their face from any telling signs that they may be struggling. They are literally masking as another person. This is very similar to playing D&D or a video game where you can play as someone else. Now, this is already a well-recognised way of dealing with ill mental health, particularly anxiety and anxiety-based conditions. I was just unaware of it. I'm not saying this is for everyone, and if you struggle with social anxiety that you should dress up, but it's one option that's available. Other advice from various mental health websites, such as the NHS social anxiety page, includes trying to understand more about your anxiety. By thinking about or writing down what goes through your mind and how you behave in certain social situations, it can help to keep a diary of this, which gives you a better understanding. Try some relaxation techniques, such as breathing exercises for stress. Break down challenging situations into smaller parts and work on feeling more relaxed with each part. Try to focus on what people are saying rather than just assuming the worst. This is something I'm still working on personally. The other ways of dealing with this struggle could include taking an anxiety buddy. Yes, that is a thing. Take someone to an event who knows you, knows what you're going through, and can help ground you if you feel like you're becoming overwhelmed. Because we don't always recognise that it's happening, it's good to have someone around who maybe does recognise your triggers or possibly recognise those physical symptoms. Make sure you know the floor plan of where you're going in advance, maybe. It sounds weird, I know, but a number of people I know deal better with their social anxiety by knowing their exits, knowing the floor plan, knowing where specific things are, where quiet spaces are, where the toilet facilities may be, for example. You could also contact the organisers in advance in order to arrange clear exit paths if needed in the more extreme cases. Another good strategy I have heard of from a number of different therapists and people who have tried it is to write yourself a list of positives that you get from the event that you will be attending. You can then read this back to yourself on your journey there or when taking a moment to yourself at the event itself. There are a lot more coping mechanisms which people report working for them. Remember, you are an individual, so if the ways of dealing with social anxiety that I have mentioned or you find online don't work, there is nothing stopping you from creating your own or expanding on an existing technique. Drop a comment down below and share some tips and tricks which you have found work for you or someone you know. It might help a stranger on the internet. Social anxiety is treatable. Professional support is always advised. If you are really struggling, please reach out to someone local who can help. CBT is often advised where possible as medical therapy for social anxiety. I hope you have all enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Please consider hitting that like button, subscribing, and leaving a comment below with your thoughts on social anxiety. It's always good to hear from others. In the meantime, stay safe and keep hobbying.